When I look at a person, I don't see someone who looks a certain way or has this or that amount of chromosomes. I just see someone who I may or may not have to destroy. So if you ever tell me what to do, I will end you.
This is Santana Lopez. She is arguably one of the best television characters of the past decade. Her involvement in Glee played a pivotal point for the show itself. She is loved by fans for being fierce, honest, confident, and being one of the most talented characters ever featured on TV. She's a party of contradictions and an extremely well-written character. If you're not new here, then you already know my process of analysis. I'll begin by going over her personality traits and doing a recap of her growth. Then we will look at her relationships and her role in the story, and finally we will look at her motives. In this video, I will go on a special tangent regarding her coming out, so I will have timestamps in the description box below, so if you're interested in a specific segment, feel free to skip over it and get to the part that you're interested in. Anyways, let's analyze Santana Lopez.
Do you ever get tired of tearing other people down?
No, not really.
Because you always just seem to be meddling in everybody else's business.
Oh, please. You guys love me. I keep it real, and I'm hilarious.
Santana is a strong HBIC type of girl. She isn't afraid to say what she thinks, and most of the time doesn't hold anything back. She can be very manipulative and scheming because she's smart. She also has an incredible ability to read people, which is why she always spots people's weaknesses and insecurities. She can also be very vulnerable when it comes to who she is and has built a protective shell to keep others away. She is a very protective friend and stands up for those she loves and cares about. In the earlier episodes of Glee, Santana is introduced as nothing more than a stereotypical cheerleader and sidekick to Quinn. She didn't really do much story-wise, but as early as episode 2, we could see hints of her snarkiness. As we get further into the first few episodes, we get hints that Santana is much closer to Brittany than she is to Quinn. Our first glimpse of how protective Santana is in the episode Mashup when Puck sings Sweet Caroline to Rachel, but we don't get to see her act on it until the episode Hairography, where she attacks Quinn for getting closer to Puck. In the last episode of Season 1A, it is hinted through dialogue intended as comic relief that Santana and Brittany are possibly friends with benefits. It's only in the second part of the season where Santana gets more of a storyline, and it starts with her pursuing Finn. This doesn't really do anything, but she ends up giving it another shot and ends up being Finn's first. In the first season, her attraction to girls isn't really addressed again, and we only see her interested in boys and expressing jealousy over them. At the start of Season 2, nothing significant happens with her character until the episode Duets, where for the first time we see Santana and Brittany in an intimate moment, fully addressing the fact that they hook up. This is the first time we see Santana's denial of what the situation might actually mean and how she isn't anywhere near ready to face what's truly going on with her. In this season, we still see her trying to have relationships with boys. She tries to get Finn to break up with Rachel so she could be with him. She later expresses possessiveness over Puck when he gets with Xyces and successfully reveals to Sam that he's being cheated on and subsequently begins dating him. During this whole time, Santana hasn't accepted her sexuality yet. It isn't until the episode Sexy where Santana's sexuality is fully addressed in an episode. After her and Brittany seek help from Holly Holiday, she shares that she is attracted to both girls and boys, and later in the episode after singing Landslide with Brittany, she fully comes to terms with who she is. By the end of the episode, Santana finally admits to Brittany that she's in love with her and doesn't want to be with any guy. Brittany admits to loving her back, but tells her that they can't be together because she's with Artie. This breaks Santana's heart and only pushes her further back. In the following episodes, she's still hiding who she is and stays in a relationship with Sam until she realizes that she can get Brittany to date her if she wins prom queen. The Born This Way episode is the first time we hear Santana say the words, "I'm a lesbian," and later, after figuring out that Kurofsky is gay, blackmails him to be her beard to run for prom court and bring Kurt back. When Santana loses prom queen, she's devastated but is comforted by Brittany, who tells her to own who she is. In the last episode of the season, they have a beautiful heart-to-heart, but we don't know if they're together yet. In Season 3, Santana is finally fed up with being in the background and joins the second Glee club, the Trouble Tones. In the same episode, she and Brittany officialize their relationship and begin officially dating. In the following episode, Santana is shown to be extremely competitive and mean, and in the episode Mash Off, everything comes to a boiling point when she gets outed by Finn after a confrontation. It is very clear that she isn't ready to come out, but is being pushed in that direction by all her fellow Glee clubbers, especially Finn. Due to an airing TV commercial outing her, she's forced to prematurely come out to her family. This goes well with her parents, but she gets disowned by her abuela. Now, I have a lot to say about Santana's coming out, and I don't want to do it in the middle of this, so I'm going to leave that for later in the video. Okay. In Hold On to 16, the troubled tones lose and the Glee Club is reunited alas. In the episode The Spanish Teacher, Santana raises the discussion about underqualified teachers being hired for jobs they shouldn't, and for the first time we hear Will Schuester admit that he shouldn't be a Spanish teacher and he ends up giving the job to someone more deserving. In the next episode, Glee finally addresses the lack of Brittana PDA and we get the first on-screen Brittana kiss. After this, Santana's storyline, like many of the other seniors, become about figuring out their future and enjoying their last days as seniors. In the last episode of season 3, it is revealed that she got a cheerleading scholarship to the University of Louisville. During an inner monologue, Santana admits to being dissatisfied with this direction and wants to be doing something more. She still ends up going, but would eventually drop out later. Santana made frequent appearances in season 4, and in the 4th episode of season 4, The Breakup, she breaks up with Brittany in order to avoid a potentially ugly breakup. After this, she continues to make appearances for mentoring, and she's pretty friendly with Brittany until she finds out that Brittany is dating Sam. She considers staying at McKinley to help Sue with the Cheerios, but ultimately makes the choice to move to New York with Rachel and Kurt. In New York, Rachel and Kurt have a hard time with her at first because she keeps meddling in their business, but it turns out that she's right about everything when she figures out that Brody is hiding something. After the Brody drama is resolved, nothing major happens with the New York gang until Santana tries out for Funny Girl and gets the part. The drama lasts a couple of weeks, but her and Rachel eventually make up when Santana realizes that she doesn't care about the part. In the same season, she starts a relationship with a girl called Danny, and it goes well, but we never really get closure on the relationship. We just see that Santana and Brittany got back together. In season 6, she's back and steady with Brittany and proposes to her, and the two get married alongside Kurt and Blaine. This is basically the end of the Santana story. We don't really know anything about what career or job she goes for later. We just see her in the 5-year time jump with Quinn and etc., and that's basically it.
Come on, Rachel, she's not worthy.
Oh, really? Because that's not what you thought last year in that motel room. That's right, Yentl. Your sweetheart? He's been lying to you. Because he and I totally got it on last year.
In the first couple of episodes, Santana was your stereotypical one-dimensional mean girl sidekick. She was there to add a touch of humor and say things other characters wouldn't and couldn't. Later in the first season, she evolved into more of a troublemaker who caused conflicts between characters. In the earlier episodes, nothing Santana did was to serve her own narrative. It was always to push another story further. In the first and second season, we see her as this crazy, jealous girl who will fight anyone who dares come near Puck. She's basically portrayed as the crazy ex-girlfriend to beware of trope. She was also portrayed as an aggressive girl with a short temper who would resort to physical violence pretty easily. To be honest, the show doesn't stop portraying her as a troublemaker until maybe the last season. Santana is the smart character who figures things out. At first, it was Rachel, but then it switched over to Santana. From season 2 and on, every time they wanted some huge secret to come out, they would use Santana as an agent for it. For example, Finn and Quinn's affair, Karofsky's sexuality, Brody's secret job. She's so good at noticing things. Like, for example, apart from the people involved, she was the only one who noticed that something weird was going on with Shelby, Puck, and Quinn, but the writers never did anything with that. She also became a rival to Quinn, and later, after Quinn leaves the show, she becomes the main rival to Rachel Berry. Disregarding everything else, Santana became one of the main LGBTQ+ representations in the media. Her story highlighted the struggles of coming out, but also showed that it gets better. Her most important role in the story was to show that love is love and that everybody deserves to be loved, and because of that, she became one of the most important characters on the show.
So I picked a song that gives me strength and gets me through. Same way all of you do. Struggle continues, but at least I know I'm not alone.
At the start, Santana's main relationships are with Puck and Quinn. Her and Puck obviously had a very toxic relationship and she exhibited a lot of possessiveness over him. With Finn, though she often insulted him, in season 1 and season 2, she expressed interest in being with him and actually flirted with him multiple times. Now, we all know that she was probably doing this for status reasons. However, given everything that happened between them, it is important to clarify all aspects of their relationship. After a confrontation, Finn outs her and she's clearly upset by it and slaps him. After this, we sit through a painful episode of Finn forcibly trying to help her, and I guess she forgives him and they stay friends. In The Quarterback, her character has a shocking breakdown while singing to Finn. That breakdown was apparently Naya's real reaction, but I personally also count it as a Santana reaction. With the rest of the Glee Club, Santana hated all of them until she joined the Glee Club. She was always pretty close to Matt and Mike though. Even though she attacked Mercedes over Puck, they had the best duets on the show hands down, and the two characters had a lot of chemistry. Their moments together were beautiful. Like many other characters on the show, she eventually became friends with Rachel Berry, but their strong ambitions eventually came between them and caused the biggest feud on the show. I'm part of the people who hated this storyline more than ever. I think that it was really cheap of the writers to harp on the behind the scene tensions. The storyline literally moved the progress that both characters had made backwards. It sucked and I hated it, and I honestly think that it wasn't necessary. Thankfully, both of the characters moved past it. At first, I thought that Santana would be nothing more than a minion for Quinn, but pretty early on, we see that she's not afraid to stand up to Quinn and would confront her whenever it was needed. The two of them constantly backstabbed each other, and even when Santana gave Quinn mono and exposed her as a cheater, it was in part due to her wanting Sam for herself, but she explicitly said that it was also for revenge. The two of them constantly insulted each other, but always made up off screen. They hook up in I Do, but neither of them really ever addressed it again. They remained a trio even after graduation and gave us amazing performances every chance they got. Danny was Santana's only other on-screen girlfriend, and they were cute, but personally I didn't really feel it, probably because I was rooting for Brittana so hard. Now let's talk about Brittana. Brittany and Santana were friends and always cared deeply for each other. She was the only exception to Santana's snark and was usually the only one with whom we would see Santana be vulnerable. Santana was always extremely protective over Brittany and saw her for more than what the others did. Arguably, we could say that Brittany was Santana's biggest weakness. Though I consider the relationship to be wholesome, Santana did manipulate Brittany into cheating with her by making her believe that it doesn't count when it's two girls. It was obvious that this didn't come from a malicious place and that Santana was very much just in love with Brittany and desperate to share that with her. To be honest, apart from the fact that she manipulated Brittany in season 2, they were really wholesome together, and I would say almost perfect. Brittana along with Tyke were the only couples who did not cheat on each other and actually broke up to preserve their friendship. Santana never asked Brittany to change who she was, and likewise with Brittany. They fully accepted each other, and honestly I believe that their couple will last because the foundation of their relationship is friendship, and that's one of the most important bonds that one can have in a relationship. It's crazy to think that one of the most mature relationships on the show was probably not going to get back together. It is said that Ryan was only going to bring back 2 of the 3 couples that split in the breakup, and we all know that Finchel and Klain were the couples he was talking about, so that's kind of crazy. Santana Lopez went from hating almost everyone she met to becoming an extremely loyal and protective friend, and honestly was at best when she used her powers for good.
I'm from Lima Heights. I was raised on insults. Tell me abuela put me to sleep at night, and she is not a nice lady. You know, she tried to sell me once, and it wasn't until I got to kindergarten that I learned my name wasn't Garbage Face.
Okay, let's talk about Santana's upbringing. So Glee didn't make anything clear about her childhood, but we did get specs that could give us an idea of who she is. We know that Santana's parents were present in her life, but she spent a lot of time with her abuela and they developed a bond. Her abuela would put her to sleep very often and practically raised her. It is also heavily implied that her parents worked a lot, so my impression is that abuela babysat Santana a lot while her parents worked and thus developed a very close relationship with her. Santana also shared that her grandmother loved her very much but was also very bigoted and mean. There were hints of racism and verbal abuse. I'm inclined to believe this because Santana herself is very blunt, and we see her abuela doesn't chew her words and says exactly what she's thinking. Santana's abuela's involvement played a pivotal part in who she became and how she would interact with people in the future. Santana is very honest and most of the time doesn't see anything wrong with how brutal she is with her honesty. In the few times we see her abuela on screen, we see a very aggressive side, but at times we also see a very loving side to her. The same very loving side we see with Santana on several occasions. There's no doubt that Abuela was an important figure in her life and shaped a huge part of Santana's personality and attitude. It's not hard to believe that Santana loved her Abuela despite all of this, because obviously she didn't know any better, and it also seems like Santana's Abuela had a fine balance between being loving and strict. Now with Santana and her father, Glee didn't give us much, but we know that he's a doctor, and up until season 3 at least, it is implied that he's still with her mom, so there's that. I get the impression that Santana was never maybe too close to her father and that he might have tried to suppress her when she was younger, because she reveals that her abuela enrolled her in ballet at the request of her father because she had a very tomboy-ish attitude. Her mother also confirmed that Santana had a tomboy phase when she was younger, like dressing as Uncle Jesse for Halloween and so on. I personally think that growing up, Santana's father might have made her feel uncomfortable with who she was and played a major part in Santana suppressing her sexuality. I'd also add that Santana's attitude in season 1 was presented as promiscuous, and there might be many reasons to that. One might be that she had daddy issues and was seeking for male validation, though that actually just might be a stretch. Another more obvious one would be that she would use this as a way to suppress her attraction towards women. In her proposal to Brittany, at one point she says that she's been bullied, and I believe that she might have been bullied when she was young for various reasons. For one, we know that she was a tomboy up until a certain point, and she is also a woman of color, so that might have played a part in it. This part reminds me of Quinn. They both became cheerleaders in high school and got an obsession with being on top because they didn't want to hurt anymore. Santana showed a lot of interest in being prom queen, and both of them had cosmetic surgery to enhance their beauty. In Santana's case, she says it was because she wanted to be noticed more, and I'm sure that was also kind of Quinn's reason for it, not fully, but yeah. I think Santana also became a cheerleader to fit in and prove her more feminine side to the outside world, like maybe her father, for example.
I'm a bitch because I'm angry. I'm angry because I have all of these feelings. Feelings for you that I'm afraid of dealing with.
Lastly, let's talk about Santana's mean attitude towards other people. Santana is a mean girl who has crossed the line more times than I can count now. We can't lie about it. It's who she is. However, like many other people, she wasn't born this way. When you're a kid, you enter this world as who you are, and based on how others treat you, you start to mold your exterior according to that. As I said earlier, there's signs that Santana was bullied, and she's a textbook case of a person who will attack first so no one will dare attack her ever. She lives in constant fear that people are going to find out what she's hiding, so she won't let anyone get too close. When we first meet Santana, we don't know it yet, but she's a very unhappy person who will point out anyone's flaws to get the wrong kind of attention from her. She wants attention, but not the right one. Paulo Coelho once said, "How people treat other people is a direct reflection of how they feel about themselves." Santana is angry and hates almost everyone, and unlike her sexuality, this is a part of her she doesn't have to suppress, so she uses it as a coping mechanism. After she comes out, her mean streak significantly reduces. However, this is still the coping mechanism she's known her whole life, and every time she gets provoked, it's her natural instinct to go back to attacking people. But the difference later is that most of the time, it's never unprovoked. There are still obviously times she took it too far, but for more than 20 years of her life, she is taught that this is the way to be, so it's just her natural reaction to being hurt.
Everyone's gonna know now because of you.
The whole school already knows. And you know what? They don't
Not just
care.
the school, you idiot. Everyone.
What are you talking about?
Santana's coming out was one of the most mishandled things on Glee, if not the worst one. Santana's character was outed by Finn in Mash Off, and in the next episode is being pushed even harder by the show's characters to come out and accept the situation as is. I want to highlight multiple problems with this episode, the first one being Finn. We all have an understanding that Finn is written as this good guy who happens to make mistakes larger than life, and this episode was only supposed to further push that narrative. When I watch this episode, my problem isn't just with Finn specifically. In the case of this episode, I see Finn as the vessel of the ignorance of the writers in this episode. This episode was written by Matthew Hodgson, and the previous one was written by Michael Hitchcock. The first mistake they made was not having Rib come back and write this episode, because this episode was an important one. After they took a backseat from writing, they mostly came back for important episodes and put in all their efforts to make it the best they could. A good example of an episode would be Theatricality. That episode was written by Ryan Murphy. In the episode, Finn used the F slur and was properly educated about it in the same episode, and he actually dealt with consequences because that was Ryan Murphy's style of writing. Most of the episodes he wrote would have an educational message to take away from it. This is why I believe that the main 3 writers should have come back to handle Santana's coming out, as it was a very important subject on the show. Now, it brings me to my second point. Another problem I noticed is actually how her sexuality was handled. All that the other characters kept saying to her was that everyone already knew and that she should just embrace it. In a scene with Puck and Quinn, Puck tells Quinn, "We just spent a whole week helping Santana on a secret that everyone already knew, and no one even took a second to look at you." While I would never want to diminish the crisis that Quinn was going through at the time, it was extremely insensitive to diminish her sexuality that way on the basis that people already knew and that they didn't care. Santana and Brittany sleeping together was only supposed to be a joke at the start of the show, but Naya and Heather pushed the writers to take it seriously. It's been a long-running theme that girl-on-girl action is hot and that no one needs to think too hard about it. Santana and Brittany's relationship was never supposed to be taken seriously, but the writers had to take it seriously because of Hea and the fans. You can tell how ignorant they were just by looking at some of the song choices. Girls Just Wanna Have Fun and I Kissed a Girl are not songs to be taken seriously in this context. I think it's really inappropriate that they chose those songs. Constant Craving and Perfect, for example, were good songs for this situation, but songs like I Kissed a Girl are not appropriate in the context of someone who's struggling with their sexuality because it isn't a game. In the scene where Santana walks down the hall after she's outed, notice how there are only guys in that scene and they were all gawking and smirking at her as if, oh yeah, being into girls is hot. I believe those who wrote this episode never made Finn's character acknowledge that he outed her because from what I saw in the episode, they probably didn't see anything wrong with that either. In my opinion, the writers who wrote this episode were not qualified to write this kind of material, and I truly wish Rib wrote the episodes for season 3 and that they took a step back for season 4 after the main characters left, because I truly believe that if they had written the episodes, a lot of the nonsense that happened in season 3 would have not been done. Santana Lopez has attained an incredible and well-deserved status amongst Gleeks. She's an incredibly talented and versatile character. She has some of the best performances on the show. Her character was a fluke that changed the course of the show. She is one of the characters who didn't need dialogue to show her presence on the screen. Her facial expressions and witty one-liners only made the show better. Every time she would smile, she would radiate our screen. She evolved from a girl who hid behind her cheerleading uniform while using it as an armor to openly expressing herself and proposing to the love of her life in the same place that oppressed her once before. Naya Rivera did a phenomenal job portraying Santana and brought to life a character that would go on to help so many others be comfortable with who they are. And for all of that, thank you to Miss Naya Rivera. You will never be forgotten. Rest in peace. Alright, that is all I have for you today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Don't hesitate to share your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.